Chapter 12. I am Balenciaga Wren. Hearing those words was like uncorking a bottle under pressure. First came the initial release, gasps, giddy laughter, and then an outpouring of joy. Emma and I jumped and hugged each other. Horace fell to his knees and tossed up his arms in a wordless hallelujah. Olive was so excited that she lifted into the air, even with her weighted shoes on, stuttering, We thought we might never see another Imbrine ever again. This, finally, was Miss Wren. Days ago, she'd been nothing more to us than the obscure Imbrine of a little-known loop, but since then, she'd achieved mythic stature. She was, as far as we knew, the last free and whole-bodied Imbrine, a living symbol of hope, something we'd all been starving for. And here she was, right in front of us, so human and frail. I recognized her from Addison's photo, only now there was no trace of black left in her silver hair. Deep-set worry lines stacked her brow and held her mouth in parentheses, and her shoulders were hunched as if she were not merely old, but straining under some monumental burden. The weight of all our desperate hope piling down on her. The Imbrine pulled back the hood of her cloak and said, "I am very glad to meet you too, dears, but you must come inside at once. It isn't safe out here." She turned and hobbled away into the passage. We fell into line, waddling behind her through the tunneled ice, like a train of ducklings after their mother, feet shuffling and arms held out in awkward balance poses to keep from slipping. Such was the power of an Imbrine over peculiar children. The very presence of one, even one we'd only just met, had an immediate pacifying effect on us. The floor ramped upward, leading us past silent furnaces, bearded with frost, into a large room, clogged floor to ceiling and wall to wall with ice, except for the tunnel we were in, which had been carved straight through the middle. The ice was thick but clear, and in some places I could see 20 or 30 feet into it, with only a slight waver of distortion. The room appeared to be a reception area, with rows of straight-back chairs, facing a massive desk, and some filing cabinets, all trapped inside tons of ice. Blue filtered daylight shone from a row of unreachable windows, beyond which was the street, a smear of indistinct gray. 100 hollows could spend a week hacking at that ice and not reach us. If not for the tunnel entrance, this place would make a perfect fortress. Either that, or a perfect prison. On the walls hung dozens of clocks, their stilled hands pointed every which way. To keep track of the time in different loops, maybe? Above them, directional signs pointed the way to certain offices. Undersecretary of Temporal Affairs, Conservator of Graphical Records, Non-Specific Matters of Urgency, Department of Obfuscation and Deferment. Through the door to the Temporal Affairs office, I saw a man trapped in the ice. He was frozen in a stooped posture, as if he'd been trying to dislodge his feet as ice overtook the rest of him. He'd been there a long time. I shuddered and looked away. The tunnel came to an end at a fancy, balustraded staircase that was free of ice, but awash in loose papers. A girl stood on one of the lower steps, and she watched our halting, slip-sliding approach without enthusiasm. She had long hair that was parted severely down the middle, and fell all the way down to her hips. Small, round glasses she was constantly adjusting, and thin lips that looked like she'd never once curled into a smile. "Althea," Miss Wren said sharply, "you mustn't wander off like that while the passage is open. Anything at all might wander in here." "Yes, mistress," the girl said, then cocked her head slightly. "Who are they, mistress?" "These are Miss Peregrine's wards, the ones I was telling you about." Have they brought any food with them? Or medicine? Or anything useful at all?" The girl spoke with excruciating slowness, her voice as wooden as her expression. "No more questions until you've closed up," Miss Wren said. "Quick now." "Yes, mistress," the girl said, and with no apparent sense of urgency, she ambled away down the tunnel, dragging her hands along the walls as she went. "Apologies for that," said Miss Wren. "Althea doesn't mean to be obstinate. She's just naturally mulish. But she keeps the wolves at bay, and we badly need her. We'll wait here until she returns." Miss Wren sat on the bottom step, and as she lowered herself, I could almost hear her old bones creaking. I didn't know what she meant by "keeps the wolves at bay," but there were too many other questions to be asked, so that one would have to wait. "Miss Wren, how did you know who we are?" asked Emma. "We never said." "It's an Imbrine's business to know," she replied. "I have watchers in the trees from here to the Irish Sea, and besides, you're famous. There's only one Imbrine whose wards were able to slip the corrupted's grasp complete and entire, and that's Miss Peregrine. But I've no idea how you made it this far without being captured, or how in peculiardom you found me." "A boy at the carnival directed us here," said Enoch. He raised a hand level with his chin. "About yay big, wearing a silly hat." "One of our lookouts," said Miss Wren, nodding. "But how did you find him?" "We caught one of your spy pigeons," Emma said proudly, "and she led us to this loop." She left out the part about Miss Peregrine having killed it. "My pigeons!" Miss Wren exclaimed. "But how did you know about them, much less catch one?" Then Millard stepped forward. He had borrowed Horace's disguising room overcoat to keep from freezing. And though Miss Wren didn't seem surprised to see a coat hovering in the air, she was astonished when the invisible boy wearing it said, "I deduced your bird's location from the tales of the peculiar, but we first heard of them in your mountaintop menagerie from a pretentious dog." "But no one knows the location of my menagerie." Miss Wren was now almost too astonished to speak, and since every answer we gave her only sparked more questions, we laid out our whole story for her as quickly as we could, stretching all the way back to our escape from the island in those tiny open boats. "We nearly drowned," said Olive. "And got shot, and bombed, and eaten by hollows," said Bronwyn. "And run over by an underground train," said Enoch. "And squashed by a dresser," said Horace, scowling at the telekinetic girl. "We've traveled a long way across dangerous country," Emma said, "all to find someone who could help Miss Peregrine. We were quite hoping that person could be you, Miss Wren." "Counting on it, really," said Millard. It took Miss Wren a few moments to find her voice, and when she did, it was gravelly with emotion. "You brave, wonderful children, you're miracles, every one of you, and any Imbrine would be lucky to call you her wards." She dabbed at a tear with the sleeve of her cloak. "I was so sorry to hear about what happened to your Miss Peregrine. I didn't know her well, as I'm a retiring sort of person, but I promise you this, we'll get her back. She and all of our sisters." "Get her back?" That's when I realized Miss Peregrine was still hidden in the sack that Horace was carrying. Miss Wren hadn't seen her yet. Horace said, "Why, she's right here," and he put the sack down and untied it. A moment later, Miss Peregrine came tottering out, dizzy after spending so long in the dark. "By the elder folk," Miss Wren exclaimed, "but I heard she'd been taken by the whites." "She was taken," Emma said, "and then we took her back." Miss Wren was so excited that she leapt up without her cane, and I had to steady her elbow to keep her from toppling over. "Alma, is that really you?" Miss Wren said breathlessly, and when she had her balance again, she rushed over to scoop up Miss Peregrine. Hello, Alma? Is that you in there? It's her, Emma said. That's Miss Peregrine. Miss Wren held the bird at arm's length, turning her this way and that, while Miss Peregrine squirmed. Miss Wren said under her breath, her eyes narrowing and her lips drawing tight. Something's not right with your headmistress. She got hurt, said Olive. Hurt on the inside. She can't turn human anymore, said Emma. Miss Wren nodded grimly, as if she'd already figured this out. How long has it been? 3 days, said Emma. Ever since we stole her back from the Whites. I said, your dog told us that if Miss Peregrine didn't change back soon, she'd never be able to. Yes, Miss Wren said. Addison was quite right about that. He also said that the sort of help she needed was something only another Imbrine could give her, said Emma. That's right, too. She's changed, said Bronwyn. She isn't herself anymore. We need the old Miss P back. We can't let this happen to her, said Horace. So, said Olive, can you turn her human now, please? We had surrounded Miss Wren and were pressing in on her, our desperation palpable. Miss Wren put up her hands in a plea for quiet. I wish it were that simple, she said, or so immediate. When an Imbrine remains a bird for too long, she becomes rigid, like a cold muscle. If you try and bend her back to shape too quickly, she'll snap. She's got to be massaged into her true form, delicately, worked and worked like clay. If I work with her through the night, I might have it done by morning. If she has that long, said Emma. Pray that she does, said Miss Wren. The long-haired girl returned, walking slowly towards us, dragging her hands along the tunnel walls. Everywhere they touched, layer upon layer of new ice formed. The tunnel behind her had already narrowed to just a few feet wide. Soon it would be closed completely, and we'd be sealed in. Miss Wren waved the girl over. Althea, run upstairs ahead of us and have the nurse prepare an examination room. I shall need all my medicinal remedies. When you say remedies, do you mean your solutions, your infusions, or your suspensions? All of them, Miss Wren shouted, and quickly, this is an emergency. Then I saw the girl notice Miss Peregrine, and her eyes widened a bit, the most I'd seen her react to anything. And she started up the stairs. This time, she was running. I held Miss Wren's arm, steadying her as we climbed the stairs. The building had 4 stories, and we were heading for the top. Aside from the stairwell, that was the only part of the building still accessible. The other floors were all frozen shut, walls of ice clogging their rooms and hallways. We were, in effect, climbing through the hollowed center of a gigantic ice cube. I glanced into some of the frozen rooms as we hurried past them. Bulging tongues of ice had broken doors off their hinges, and through their splintered jambs, I could see evidence of a raid. Kicked over furniture, drawers torn open, snows of paper on the floor. A machine gun leaned against a desk, its owner frozen in flight. A peculiar slumped in a corner beneath a slash of bullet holes. Like the victims of Pompeii, arrested in ice rather than ash. It was hard to believe one girl could have been responsible for all this. Apart from Imbrines, Althea had to be one of the most powerful peculiars I'd ever met. I looked up in time to see her disappear around the landing above us, that endless mane of her hair trailing behind her like a blurred afterimage. I snapped an icicle off the wall. She really did all this, I said, turning it in my hand. She did indeed, said Miss Wren, puffing beside me. She is, or was, I should say, apprenticed to the Minister of Obfuscation and Deferment, and was here performing her duties on the day the corrupted raided the building. At the time, she knew little of her power other than that her hands radiated unnatural cold. To hear Althea tell it, her ability was the sort of thing that came in useful during hot summer days, but which she'd never thought of as a defense weapon until two hollows began devouring the minister before her very eyes. In mortal fear, she called upon a well of power previously unknown to her, froze the room and the hollows, and then the entire building, all in the space of a few minutes. "Minutes," Emma said. "I don't believe it." "I rather wish I'd been here to witness it," said Miss Wren. "Though, if I had, I likely would have been kidnapped along with the other Imbrines who were present at the time. Miss Nightjar, Miss Finch, and Miss Crow." "Her ice didn't stop the whites?" I asked. "It stopped many of them," said Miss Wren. "Several are still with us, I imagine, frozen in the building's recesses. But despite their losses, the whites ultimately got what they came for. Before the entire building froze, they managed to secrete the Imbrines out through the roof." Miss Wren shook her head bitterly. "I swear on my life, one day I'll personally escort all those that hurt my sisters to hell." "All that power she has didn't do any good at all then," said Enoch. "Althea wasn't able to save the Imbrines," Miss Wren said, "but she made this place, and that's blessing enough. Without it, we'd have no refuge anywhere. I've been using it as our base of operations for the past few days, bringing back survivors from raided loops as I come across them. This is our fortress, the only safe place for peculiars in all of London." "And what of your efforts, madam?" said Millard. "The dogs said you came here to help your sisters. Have you had any luck?" "No," she said quietly. "My efforts have not been successful." "Maybe Jacob can help you, Miss Wren," Olive said. "He's very special." Miss Wren looked sideways at me. "Is that so? And what is your talent, young man?" "I can see hollows," I said, a little embarrassed, "and sense them." "And kill them sometimes," added Bronwyn. "If we hadn't found you, Miss Wren, Jacob was going to help us slip past the hollows that guard the punishment loops so that we could rescue one of the Imbrines being held there. In fact, maybe he could help you." "That's kind of you," said Miss Wren. "But my sisters are not being held in the punishment loops, or anywhere near London, I'm sure." "They aren't?" I said. "No, and they never were. That business about the punishment loops was a ruse concocted to ensnare those Imbrines whom the corrupted weren't able to capture in their raids, namely myself. And it nearly worked. Like a fool, I flew right into their trap. The punishment loops are prisons after all. I'm lucky to have escaped with only a few scars to show for it." "Then where were the kidnapped Imbrines taken?" asked Emma. "I wouldn't tell you even if I knew, because it's none of your concern," Miss Wren said. "It isn't the duty of peculiar children to worry for the welfare of Imbrines. It's ours to worry for yours." "But Miss Wren, that's hardly fair," Millard began. But she cut him short with a curt, "I won't hear anything else about it." And that was that. I was shocked by this sudden dismissal, especially considering that if we hadn't worried about Miss Peregrine's welfare and risked our lives to bring her here, she would have been condemned to spend the rest of her days trapped in the body of a bird. So it did seem like our duty to worry, since the Imbrines had clearly not done a good enough job worrying to keep their loops from being raided. I didn't like being talked down to that way, and judging from Emma's knitted brow, she didn't either. But to have said so would have been unthinkably rude. So we finished our climb in awkward silence. We came to the top of the stairs. Only a few of the doorways on this level were iced over. Miss Wren took Miss Peregrine from Horace and said, Come on, Alma. Let's see what can be done for you. Althea appeared in an open door, her face flushed, chest heaving. Your room's all ready, mistress. Everything you asked for. Good, said Miss Wren. If we can do anything to help you, Bronwyn said, anything at all. All I need is time and quiet, Miss Wren replied. I'll save your Imbrine young ones. On my life I will. And she turned and took Miss Peregrine into the room with Althea. Not knowing what else to do with ourselves, we drifted after her and congregated around the door, which had been left open a crack. We took turns peeking inside. In a cozy room dimly lit by oil lamps, Miss Wren sat in a rocking chair, holding Miss Peregrine in her lap. Althea stood mixing vials of liquid at a lab table. Every so often, she'd lift a vial and swirl it, then walk to Miss Peregrine and pass it under her beak, much the way smelling salts are waved under the nose of someone who's fainted. All the while, Miss Wren rocked in the chair and stroked Miss Peregrine's feathers, singing her a soft, lilting lullaby. That's the tongue of the old peculiars, Millard whispered. Come home, come home. Remember your true self. Something like that. Miss Wren heard him and looked up, then waved us away. Althea crossed the room and shut the door. Well then, said Enoch, I can see we're not wanted here. After 3 days of the headmistress depending on us for everything, we had suddenly become extraneous. Though we were grateful to Miss Wren, she'd made us feel a bit like children who'd been ordered to bed. Miss Wren knows her business, came a Russian-accented voice from behind us. Best leave her to it. We turned to see the stick-thin folding man from the carnival, standing with his bony arms crossed. You, said Emma. We meet again, the folding man said, his voice deep as an ocean trench. My name is Sergei Andropov, and I am captain of Peculiar Resistance Army. Come, I will show you around. I knew he was peculiar, Olive said. No, you didn't, said Enoch. You only thought he was. I knew you were peculiar the second I saw you, said the folding man. How you weren't captured long time ago. Because we're wily, said Hugh. He means lucky, I said. But mostly just hungry, said Enoch. Got any food around here? I could eat an emo raff. At the mere mention of food, my stomach growled like a wild animal. None of us had eaten since our train ride to London, which seemed eons ago. Of course, said the folding man. This way. We followed him down the hall. So tell me about this peculiar army of yours, Emma said. We will crush the whites and take back what's ours. Punish them for kidnapping our Imbrines. He opened a door off the hallway and led us through a wrecked office where people lay sleeping on the floor and under desks. As we stepped around them, I recognized a few of their faces from the carnival. The plain-looking boy, the frizzy-haired snake charmer girl. They're all peculiar? I asked. The folding man nodded. Rescued from other loops, he said, holding a door open for us. And you? Said Millard. Where did you come from? The folding man led us into a vestibule where we could talk without disturbing the sleepers. A room dominated by 2 large wooden doors emblazoned with dozens of bird insignias. I came from land of frozen desert, beyond icy waste, he said. 100 years ago, when Hollow's first born, they strike my home first. Everything destroy. All in village killed. Old woman, baby, all. He made a chopping motion in the air with his hand. I hide in butter churn, breathe through reed of straw, while own brother killed in same house. After, I come to London to escape the Hollows, but they come too." "That's awful," said Bronwyn. "I'm so sorry for you." "One day we take revenge," he said, his face darkening. "You mentioned that," said Enoch. "How many are in your army then?" "Right now, 6, he said, gesturing to the room we'd just left. "6 people?" said Emma. "You mean them?" I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "With you makes 17. We growing quick." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," I said. "We didn't come here to join any army." He gave me a look that could freeze hell, then turned and threw open the double doors. We followed him into a large room dominated by a massive oval table, its wood polished to a mirror shine. "This is Imbrian Council meeting place," the folding man said. All around us were portraits of famous old peculiars, not framed, but drawn directly onto the walls in oil and charcoal and grease pencil. The one closest to me was a face with wide, staring eyes and an open mouth, inside of which was a real, functioning water fountain. Around its mouth was a motto written in Dutch, which Millard, standing next to me, translated. "From the mouths of our elders comes a fountain of wisdom." Nearby was another, this one in Latin. "Ardet nec consumitur," Melina said. "Burned but not destroyed." "How fitting," said Enoch. "I can't believe I'm really here," said Melina. "I've studied this place and dreamed about it for so many years." "It's just a room," said Enoch. "Maybe to you, but to me, it's the heart of the whole peculiar world." "A heart that's been ripped out," said someone new. And I looked to see a clown striding toward us, the same one who'd been stalking us at the carnival. Miss Jackdaw was standing right where you are when she was taken. We found a whole pile of her feathers on the floor. His accent was American. He stopped a few feet from us and stood, chewing, one hand on his hip. "This them?" he asked the folding man, pointing at us with a turkey leg. "We need soldiers, not little kids." "I'm 112, said Melina. Yeah, I've heard it all before," said the clown. "I could tell you people were peculiar from across the fairgrounds, by the way. You're the most obviously peculiar bunch of peculiars I've ever laid eyes on." "I told them the same thing," said the folding man. "How they made it all the way here from Wales without being captured is beyond me," said the clown. "In fact, it's suspicious. Sure one of you ain't a white?" "How dare you," said Emma. "We were captured," Hugh said proudly, "but the whites who took us didn't live to tell about it." "Uh-huh, and I'm the king of Bolivia," the clown said. "It's true," Hugh thundered, going red in the face. The clown tossed up his hands. Okay, calm down, kid. I'm sure Wren wouldn't have let you in if you weren't legitimate. Come on, let's be friends. Have a turkey leg." He didn't have to offer twice. We were too hungry to stay offended for long. The clown showed us to a table stacked with food, the same boiled nuts and roasted meats that had tempted us at the carnival. We crowded around the table and stuffed our faces shamelessly. The folding man ate 5 cherries and a small hunk of bread, and then announced he'd never been so full in his life. Bronwyn paced along the wall, chewing her fingers, too consumed by worry to eat. When we were done, and the table was a battlefield of gnawed bones and grease stains, the clown leaned back in his chair and said, "So, peculiar children, what's your story? Why'd you come all the way here from Wales?" Emma wiped her mouth and said, "To help our Imbrine." "And when she's helped," the clown said, "what then?" I'd been busy sopping up turkey gravy with the last of the bread, but now I looked up. The question was so straightforward, so simply put, so obvious, that I couldn't believe none of us had asked it before. "Don't talk like that," said Horace. "You'll jinx us." "Wren's a miracle worker," the clown said. "There's nothing to worry about." "I hope you're right," said Emma. "Of course I am. So what's your plan? You'll stay and help us fight, obviously, but where will you sleep? Not with me. My room's a single. Exceptions rarely made." He looked at Emma and raised an eyebrow. "Note, I said, rarely." All of a sudden, everyone was looking off at the paintings on the walls or adjusting their collars, except for Emma, whose face was turning a certain shade of green. Maybe we were naturally pessimistic, and our chances of success had seemed so tiny that we'd never bothered to wonder what we'd do if we actually fixed Miss Peregrine. Or maybe the crisis of the past few days had been so constant and pressing that we'd never had a chance to wonder. Either way, the clown's question had caught us off guard. What if we really pulled this off? What would we do if Miss Peregrine walked into the room right now, restored to her old self? It was Millard who finally gave an answer. "I suppose we would head west again, back where we come from. Miss Peregrine could make another loop for us, one where we'd never be found." "That's it," the clown said. "You'll hide? What about all the other Imbrines, the ones who weren't so lucky? What about mine?" "It isn't our job to save the whole world," Horace said. "We're not trying to save the whole world, just all of peculiardom." "Well, that's not our job either." Horace sounded weak and defensive, ashamed to have been cornered into saying this. The clown leaned forward in his chair and glared at us. "Then whose job is it?" "There's got to be someone else," said Enoch. "People who are better equipped, who've trained for this sort of thing." The first thing the corrupted did 3 weeks ago was attack the peculiar home guard. In less than a day, they were scattered to the four winds. With them gone, and now our Imbrines, who does the defense of peculiardom fall to, huh? People like you and me, that's who. The clown threw down his turkey leg. "You cowards disgust me. I just lost my appetite." "They are tired, had long journey," said the folding man. "Give them break." The clown waved his finger in the air like a schoolmarm. Nobody rides for free. I don't care if you're here for an hour or a month. As long as you're here, you've got to be willing to fight. Now, you're a scrawny-looking bunch, but you're peculiar, so I know you've all got hidden talents. Show me what you can do." He got up and moved toward Enoch, one arm extended like he was going to search Enoch's pockets for his peculiar ability. "You there," he said. "Do your thing." "I'll need a dead person in order to demonstrate," Enoch said. "That could be you if you so much as lay one finger on me." The clown rerouted himself toward Emma. "Then how about you, sweetheart?" he said. And Emma held a particular finger up and made a flame dance atop it like a birthday candle. The clown laughed and said, "Sense of humor, I like that," and moved on to the blind brothers. "They're connected in the head," said Melina, putting herself between the clown and the brothers. "They can see with their ears and always know what the other's thinking." The clown clapped his hands. "Finally, something useful. They'll be our lookouts. Put one in the carnival and keep the other here. If anything goes wrong out there, we'll know right away." He pushed past Melina. The brothers shied away from him. "You can't separate them," said Melina. "Joel and Peter don't like being apart." "And I don't like being hunted by invisible corpse beasts," said the clown. And he began to pry the older brother from the younger. The boys locked arms and moaned loudly, their tongues clicking and eyes rolling wildly in their heads. I was about to intervene when the brothers came apart and let out a doubled scream so loud and piercing, I feared my head would break. The dishes on the table shattered. Everyone ducked and clapped their hands over their ears. And I thought I could hear, from the frozen floors below, cracks spidering through the ice. As the echo faded, Joel and Peter clutched each other on the floor, shaking. "See what you did?" Melina shouted at the clown. "Good God, that's impressive," the clown said. With one hand, Bronwyn picked the clown up by his neck. "If you continue to harass us," she said calmly, "I'll put your head through the wall." "Sorry about that," the clown wheezed through his closing windpipe. "Put me down?" "Go on, Win," said Olive. "He said he's sorry." Reluctantly, Bronwyn set him down. The clown coughed and straightened his costume. "Looks like I misjudged you," he said. "You'll make fine additions to our army." "I told you, we're not joining your stupid army," I said. "What's the point of fighting anyway?" Emma said. "You don't even know where the Imbrines are." The folding man unfolded from his chair to tower above us. "Point is," he said, "if corrupted get rest of Imbrines, they become unstoppable." "Seems like they're pretty unstoppable already," I said. "If you think that's unstoppable, you ain't seen nothing yet," said the clown. "And if you think that while your Imbrine is free, they'll ever stop hunting you, you're stupider than you look." Horace stood up and cleared his throat. "You've just laid out the worst-case scenario," he said. "Of late, I've heard a great many worst-case scenarios presented, but I haven't heard a single argument laid for the best-case scenario." "Oh, this should be rich," said the clown. "Go ahead, fancy boy, let's hear it." Horace took a deep breath, working up his courage. "The whites wanted the Imbrines, and now they have them. Or most of them, anyway. Say, for the sake of argument, that's all the whites need, and now they can follow through with their devilish plans. And they do. They become super whites, or demigods, or whatever it is they're after. And then they have no more use for Imbrines, and no more use for peculiar children, and no more use for time loops. So they go away to be demigods elsewhere and leave us alone. And then things not only go back to normal, they're better than they were before, because no longer is anyone attempting to eat us or kidnap our Imbrines. And then maybe, once in a great while, we could take a vacation abroad like we used to, and see the world a bit, and put our toes in the sand somewhere that isn't cold and gray 300 days of the year. In which case, what's the use in staying here and fighting? We'd be throwing ourselves onto their swords when everything might just turn out rosy without our intervention. For a moment, no one said anything. Then the clown began to laugh. He laughed and laughed, his cackles bouncing off the walls, until finally he fell out of his chair. Then Enoch said, "I simply have no words. Wait, no, I do. Horace, that is the most stunningly naive and cowardly bit of wishful thinking that I've ever heard." "But it's possible," Horace insisted. "Yes, it's also possible that the moon is made of cheese. It's just not bloody likely." "I can end argument right now," said the folding man. "You want to know what whites will do with us once free to do anything? Come, I show you." "Strong stomachs only," said the clown, glancing at Olive. "If they can handle it, I can too," she said. "Fair warning," the clown shrugged. "Follow us." "I wouldn't follow you off a sinking ship," said Melina, who was just getting the shaking blind brothers to their feet again. "Stay then," said the clown. "Anyone who'd rather not go down with the ship? Follow us." The injured lay in mismatched beds in a makeshift hospital room, watched over by a nurse with a bulging glass eye. There were 3 patients, if you could call them that, a man, and 2 women. The man lay on his side, half catatonic, whispering and drooling. One of the women stared blankly at the ceiling, while the other writhed under her sheets, moaning softly in the grip of some nightmare. Some of the children watched from outside the door, keeping their distance in case whatever these people suffered from was contagious. "How are they today?" the folding man asked the nurse. "Getting worse," she replied, buzzing from bed to bed. "I keep them all sedated all the time now. Otherwise, they just bawl." They had no obvious wounds. There were no bloody bandages, no limbs wrapped in casts, no bowls brimming with reddish liquid. The room looked more like an overflow from a psychiatric ward than a hospital. "What's the matter with them?" I asked. "They were hurt in the raid?" "No, brought here by Miss Wren," answered the nurse. "She found them abandoned inside a hospital, which the whites had converted into some sort of medical laboratory. These pitiful creatures were used as guinea pigs in their unspeakable experiments. What you see is the result." "We found their old records," the clown said. "They were kidnapped years ago by the whites, long assumed dead." The nurse took a clipboard from the wall by the whispering man's bed. "This fellow, Ben Tarrant, he's supposed to be fluent in 100 languages, but now he'll only say one word, over and over again." I crept closer, watching his lips. "Call, call, call," he was mouthing. "Call, call, call." Gibberish. His mind was gone. "That one there," the nurse said, pointing her clipboard at the moaning girl. "Her chart says she can fly, but I've never seen her so much as lift an inch out of that bed. As for the other one, she's meant to be invisible, but she's plain as day." "Were they tortured?" Emma asked. "Obviously, they were tortured out of their minds," said the clown. "Tortured until they forgot how to be peculiar." "You could torture me all day long," said Millard. "I'd never forget how to be invisible." "Show them the scars," said the clown to the nurse. The nurse crossed to the motionless woman and pulled back her sheets. There were thin red scars across her stomach, along the side of her neck, and beneath her chin, each about the length of a cigarette. "I'd hardly call this evidence of torture," said Millard. "Then what would you call it?" the nurse said angrily. Ignoring her question, Millard said, "Are there more scars, or is this all she has?" "Not by a long shot," said the nurse, and she whisked the sheets off to expose the woman's legs, pointing out scars on the back of the woman's knee, her inner thigh, and the bottom of her foot. Millard bent to examine the foot. "That's an odd placement, wouldn't you say?" "What are you getting at, Mill?" said Emma. "Hush," said Enoch. "Let him play Sherlock if he wants. I'm rather enjoying this." "Why don't we cut him in 10 places?" said the clown. "Then we'll see if he thinks it's torture." Millard crossed the room to the whispering man's bed. "May I examine him?" "I'm sure he won't object," said the nurse. Millard lifted the man's sheets from his legs. On the bottom of one of his bare feet was a scar identical to the motionless woman's. The nurse gestured toward the writhing woman. "She's got one too, if that's what you're looking for." "Enough of this," said the folding man. "If that is not torture, then what?" "Exploration," said Millard. "These incisions are precise and surgical, not meant to inflict pain, probably done under anesthetic even. The whites were looking for something." "And what was that?" Emma asked, though she seemed to dread the answer. "There's an old saying about a peculiar's foot," said Millard. "Do any of you remember it?" Horace recited it. "A peculiar's soul is the door to his soul," he said. It's just something they tell kids, though, to get them to wear shoes when they play outside. Maybe it is, and maybe it's not, said Millard. Don't be ridiculous. You think they were looking for their souls, and they found them. The clown laughed out loud. What a pile of baloney. Just because they lost their abilities, you think their second souls were removed? Partly. We know the whites have been interested in the second soul for years now. Then I remembered the conversation Millard and I had on the train, and I said, but you told me yourself that the peculiar soul is what allows us to enter loops. So if these people don't have souls, how are they here? Well, they're not really here, are they? Said Millard. By which I mean their minds are certainly elsewhere. Okay, now you're grasping at straws, said Emma. I think you've taken this far enough, Millard. Bear with me for just a moment longer, Millard said. He was pacing now, getting excited. I don't suppose you heard about the time a normal actually did enter a loop. No, because everyone knows that's impossible, said Enoch. It nearly is, said Millard. It isn't easy and it isn't pretty, but it has been done. Once. An illegal experiment conducted by Miss Peregrine's own brother, I believe, in the years before he went mad and formed the splinter group that would become the Whites. Then why haven't I ever heard about this, said Enoch. Because it was extremely controversial, and the results were immediately covered up, so no one would attempt to replicate them. In any event, it turns out that you can bring a normal into a loop, but they have to be forced through, and only someone with an Imbrian's power can do it. But because normals do not have a second soul, they cannot handle a time loop's inherent paradoxes, and their brains turn to mush. They become drooling, catatonic vegetables from the moment they enter, not unlike these poor people before us. There was a moment of quiet while Millard's words registered. Then Emma's hands went to her mouth and she said, Oh, hell, he's right. Well then, said the clown, in that case, things are even worse than we thought. I felt the air go out of the room. I'm not sure I follow, said Horace. He said the monsters stole their souls, Olive shouted. And then she ran crying to Bronwyn and buried her face in her coat. These peculiars didn't lose their abilities, said Millard. They were stolen from them, extracted, along with their souls, which were then fed to Hallowgast. This allowed the Hollows to evolve sufficiently to enter loops, a development which enabled their recent assault on peculiardom, and netted the Whites even more kidnapped peculiars whose souls they could extract, in which they evolved still more Hollows, and so on, in a vicious cycle. Then it isn't just the Imbrians they want, said Emma. It's us too, and our souls. Hugh stood at the foot of the whispering man's bed, his last bee buzzing angrily around him. All the peculiar children they kidnapped over the years. This is what they were doing to them? I figured they just became Hallowgas food, but this is leagues more evil. Who's to say they don't mean to extract the Imbrian souls too? Said Enoch. That sent a special chill through us. The clown turned to Horace and said, How's your best case scenario looking now, fella? Don't tease me, Horace replied. I bite. Everyone out, ordered the nurse. Souls or no souls, these people are ill. This is no place to bicker. We filed sullenly into the hall. All right, you've given us the horror show, Emma said to the clown and the folding man, and we are duly horrified. Now tell us what you want. Simple, said the folding man. We want you to stay and fight with us. We just figured we'd show you how much it's in your best interest to do so, said the clown. He clapped Millard on the back. But your friend here did a better job of that than we ever could have. Stay here and fight for what? Enoch said. The Imbrines aren't even in London. Miss Wren said as much. Forget London. London's finished, the clown said. The battle's over here. We lost. As soon as Wren has saved every last peculiar she can from these ruined loops, we'll posse up and travel to other lands, other loops. There must be more survivors out there, peculiars like us, with the fight still burning in them. We will build army, said the folding man. Real one. As for finding out where the Imbrines are, said the clown, no problem. We'll catch a white and torture it out of him. Make him show us on the map of days. You have a map of days? Said Millard. We have two. The Peculiar Archives is downstairs, you know. That is good news indeed, Millard said, his voice charged with excitement. Catching a white is easier said than done, said Emma. And they lie, of course. Lying is what they do best. Then we'll catch two and compare their lies, the clown said. They come sniffing around here pretty often. So next one we see, bam, we'll grab him. There's no need to wait, said Enoch. Didn't Miss Wren say there are whites in this very building? Sure, said the clown, but they're frozen, dead as doornails. That doesn't mean they can't be interrogated, Enoch said, a grin spreading across his face. The clown turned to the folding man. I'm really starting to like these weirdos. Then you are with us? Said the folding man. You'd stay and fight? I didn't say that, said Emma. Give us a minute to talk this over. What is there to talk over? Said the clown. Of course, take all time you need, said the folding man, and he pulled the clown down the hall with them. Come, I will make coffee. All right, the clown said reluctantly. We formed a huddle, just as we had so many times since our troubles began. Only this time, rather than shouting over one another, we spoke in orderly turns. The gravity of all this had put us in a solemn state of mind. I think we should fight, said Hugh. Now that we know what the whites are doing to us, I couldn't live with myself if we just went back to the way things were and tried to pretend none of this was happening. To fight is the only honorable thing. There's honor in survival, too, said Millard. Our kind survived the 20th century by hiding, not fighting, so perhaps all we need is a better way to hide. Then Bronwyn turned to Emma and said, I want to know what you think. Yeah, I want to know what Emma thinks, said Olive. Me too, said Enoch, which took me by surprise. Emma drew a long breath, then said, I feel terrible for the other Imbrines. It's a crime what's happened to them, and the future of our kind may depend on their rescue. But when all is said and done, my allegiance doesn't belong to those other Imbrines, or to the other peculiar children. It belongs to the woman to whom I owe my life, Miss Peregrine, and Miss Peregrine alone. She paused and nodded, as if testing and confirming the soundness of her own words, and then continued. And when, bird willing, she becomes herself again, I'll do whatever she needs me to do. If she says fight, I'll fight. If she wants to hide us away in a loop somewhere, I'll go along with that too. Either way, my creed has never changed. Miss Peregrine knows best. The others considered this. Finally, Millard said, Very wisely put, Miss Bloom. Miss Peregrine knows best, cheered Olive. Miss Peregrine knows best, echoed Hugh. I don't care what Miss Peregrine says, said Horace. I'll fight. Enoch choked back a laugh. You? Everyone thinks I'm a coward. This is my chance to prove them wrong. Don't throw your life away because of a few jokes made at your expense, said Hugh. Who gives a whit what anyone else thinks? It isn't just that, said Horace. Remember the vision I had back on Cairnholm? I caught a glimpse of where the Imbrines are being kept. I couldn't show you on a map, but I'm sure of this. I'll know it when I see it. He tapped his forehead with his index finger. What I've got up here might just save those chaps a heap of trouble, and save those other inbreeds too. If some fight and some stay behind, said Bronwyn, I'll protect whoever stays. Protecting's always been my vocation. And then Hugh turned to me and said, What about you, Jacob? And my mouth went instantly dry. Yeah, said Enoch. What about you? Well, I said, Let's take a walk, Emma said, hooking her arm around mine. You and I need to have a chat. We walked slowly down the stairs, saying nothing to each other until we'd reached the bottom and the curved wall of ice where Althea had frozen shut the exit tunnel. We sat together and looked into the ice for a long while, at the forms trapped there, blurred and distorted in the darkening light, suspended like ancient eggs in blue amber. We sat, and I could tell from the silence connecting between us that this was going to be a hard conversation, one neither of us wanted to start. Finally, Emma said, Well? I said, I'm like the others. I want to know what you think. She laughed in the way people do when something's not funny but awkward and said, I'm not entirely sure you do. She was right, but I prodded her to speak anyway. Come on. Emma laid a hand on my knee, then retracted it. She fidgeted. My chest tightened. I think it's time you went home, she said finally. I blinked. It took a moment to convince myself she'd really said it. I don't understand, I mumbled. You said yourself you were sent here for a reason, she said quickly, staring into her lap. And that was to help Miss Peregrine. Now it seems she may be saved. If you owed her any debts, they're paid. You helped us more than you'll ever realize. And now it's time for you to go home. Her words came all in a rush, like they were a painful thing she'd been carrying a long time, and it was a relief to finally be rid of them. This is my home, I said. No, it isn't, she insisted, looking at me now. Peculiardom is dying, Jacob. It's a lost dream. And even if somehow, by some miracle, we were to take up arms against the corrupted and prevail, we'd be left with a shadow of what we'd once had, a shattered mess. You have a home, one that isn't ruined, and parents who are alive and who love you in some measure. I told you, I don't want those things. I chose this. You made a promise, and you've kept it. And now that's over, and it's time for you to go home. Quit saying that, I shouted. Why are you pushing me away? Because you have a real home and a real family. And if you think any of us would have chosen this world over those things, wouldn't have given up our loops and longevity and peculiar powers long ago for even a taste of what you have, then you really are living in a fantasy world. It makes me absolutely ill to think you might throw that all away. And for what? For you, you idiot. I love you. I couldn't believe I'd said it. Neither could Emma. Her mouth had fallen open. No, she said, shaking her head like she could erase my words. No, that's not going to help anything. But it's true, I said. Why do you think I stayed instead of going home? It wasn't because of my grandfather or some stupid sense of duty. Not really. Or because I hated my parents or didn't appreciate my home and all the nice things we had. I stayed because of you. She didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded and then looked away and ran her hands through her hair, revealing a streak of white concrete dust I hadn't noticed before, which made her look suddenly older. It's my fault, she said finally. I should never have kissed you. Perhaps I made you believe something that wasn't true. That stung me, and I recoiled instinctively, as if to protect myself. Don't say that to me if you don't mean it, I said. I may not have a lot of dating experience, but don't treat me like some pathetic loser who's powerless in the face of a pretty girl. You didn't make me stay. I stayed because I wanted to, and because what I feel for you is as real as anything I've ever felt. I let that hang in the air between us for a moment, feeling the truth of it. You feel it too, I said. I know you do. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry, that was cruel and I shouldn't have said it. Her eyes watered a little, and she wiped at them with her hand. She had tried to make herself like stone, but now the facade was falling away. You're right, she said. I care about you very much. That's why I can't watch you throw your life away for nothing. I wouldn't be. Damn it, Jacob, yes you would. She was so incensed that she inadvertently lit a fire in her hand, which luckily, since she'd removed from my knee. She clapped her hands together, snuffed the flame, and then stood up. Pointing into the ice, she said, See that potted plant on the desk in there? I saw and nodded. It's green now, preserved by the ice, but inside, it's dead. And the moment that ice melts, it'll turn brown and wither into mush. She locked eyes with me. I'm like that plant. You aren't, I said. You're perfect. Her face tightened into an expression of forced patience, as if she were explaining something to a thick-headed child. She sat down again, took my hand, and raised it to her smooth cheek. This, she said, is a lie. It's not really me. If you could see me for what I really am, you wouldn't want me anymore. I don't care about that stuff. I'm an old woman, she said. You think we're alike, but we aren't. This person you say you love, she's really a hag, an old crone hiding in the body of a girl. You're a young man, a boy, a baby compared to me. You could never understand what it's like, being this close to death all the time. And you shouldn't. I never want you to. You've still got your whole life to look forward to, Jacob. I've already spent mine. And one day, soon perhaps, I will die and return to dust. She said it with such a cold finality that I knew she believed it. It hurt her to say these things, just as it hurt me to hear them. But I understood why she was doing it. She was, in her way, trying to save me. It stung anyway, partly because I knew she was right. If Miss Peregrine recovered, then I would have done what I'd set out to do. Solved the mystery of my grandfather, settled my family's debts to Miss Peregrine, lived the extraordinary life I'd always dreamed of, or part of one anyway. At which point, my only remaining obligation was to my parents. As for Emma, I didn't care at all that she was older than me, or different from me. But she'd made up her mind that I should, and it seemed there was no convincing her otherwise. Maybe when this is all over, she said, I'll send you a letter, and you'll send one back. And maybe one day you can come see me again. A letter. I thought of the dusty box of them I'd found in her room, written by my grandfather. Was that all I'd be to her? An old man across the ocean? A memory? And I realized that I was about to follow in my grandfather's footsteps in a way I'd never thought possible. In so many ways, I was living his life. And probably one day, my guard would relax too much. I'd get old and slow and distracted, and I would die his death. and Emma would continue on without me, without either of us. And one day, maybe, someone would find my letters in her closet, in a box besides my grandfather's, and wonder who we were to her. What if you need me? I said. What if the hollows come back? Tears shimmered in her eyes. We'll manage somehow, she said. Look, I can't talk about this anymore. I honestly don't think my heart can take it. Shall we go upstairs and tell the others your decision? I clenched my jaw, suddenly irritated by how hard she was pushing me. I haven't decided anything, I said. You have. Jacob, I just told you. Right, you told me, but I haven't made up my mind yet. She crossed her arms. Then I can wait. No, I said, and stood up. I need to be by myself for a while. And I went up the stairs without her. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13. I moved quietly through the halls. I stood outside the inbreed meeting room for a while, listening to muffled voices through the door, but I didn't go in. I peeked into the nurse's room and saw her dozing on a stool between the single-souled peculiars. I cracked the door to Miss Wren's room and saw her rocking Miss Peregrine in her lap, gently kneading her fingers into the bird's feathers. I said nothing to anyone. Wandering through empty halls and ransacked offices, I tried to imagine what home would feel like if after all this I chose to go back. What I would tell my parents. I'd tell them nothing, most likely. They'd never believe me anyway. I would say I'd gotten mad, written a letter to my father filled with crazy stories, then caught a boat to the mainland and run away. They'd call it a stress reaction, chalk it up to some invented disorder and adjust my meds accordingly. Blame Dr. Golan for suggesting I go to Wales. Dr. Golan, whom of course they'd never hear from again. He'd skip town, they'd say, because he was a fraud, a quack whom we never should have trusted. And I'd go back to being Jacob, the poor, traumatized, mentally disturbed rich kid. It sounded like a prison sentence. And yet, if my best reason for staying in peculiardom didn't want me anymore, I wouldn't debase myself by clinging to her. I had my pride. How long could I stand Florida, now that I'd had a taste of this peculiar life? I was not nearly as ordinary as I used to be. Or if it was true that I had never been ordinary, now I knew it. I had changed, and that at least gave me some hope. That even under ordinary circumstances, I still might find a way to live an extraordinary life. Yes, it was best to go. It really was best. If this world was dying and there was nothing to be done for it, then what was left for me here? To run and hide until there was no safe place left to go? No loop to sustain my friend's artificial youth? To watch them die? To hold Emma as she crumbled and broke apart in my arms? That would kill me faster than any hollow could. So yes, I would go. Salvage what was left of my old life. Goodbye, peculiars. Goodbye, peculiardom. It was for the best. I wandered until I came to a place where the rooms were only half frozen, and the ice had risen halfway to the ceiling, like water in a sinking ship, and then stopped, leaving the tops of desks and the heads of lamps sticking out like faltering swimmers. Beyond the ice windows, the sun was sinking. Shadows bloomed across the walls and multiplied in the stairwells. And as the light died, it got bluer, painting everything around me in a deep sea cobalt. It occurred to me that this was probably my last night in peculiardom, my last night with the best friends I've ever had, my last night with Emma. Why was I spending it alone? Because I was sad, and Emma had hurt my pride, and I needed to sulk? Enough of this. Just as I turned to leave the room, though, I felt it, that old familiar twinge in my gut. A hollow. I stopped, waiting for another hit of pain. I needed more information. The intensity of the pain corresponded to the nearness of the hollow and the frequency of the hits with its strength. When two strong hollows had been chasing us, the feeling had been one long, unbroken spasm. But now it was a long time before I felt another, nearly a minute. And when it came, it was so faint I wasn't even sure I'd felt it. I crept slowly out of the room and down the hall. As I passed the next doorway, I felt a third twinge. A little stronger now, but still only a whisper. I tried to open the door carefully and quietly, but it was frozen shut. I had to yank on it, then rattle the door, then kick it, until finally it flew open to reveal a doorway and a room filled with ice that rose to mid-chest height. I approached the ice cautiously and peered across it, and even in the weak light, I saw the hollow right away. It was crouched on the floor, encased in ice up to its ink-black eyeballs. Only the top half of its head was exposed above the ice. The rest of it, the dangerous parts, its open jaws and all its teeth and tongues, were all caught below the surface. The thing was just barely alive. Its heart slowed almost to nothing, beating maybe once per minute. With each feeble pulse, I felt a corresponding stitch of pain. I stood at the mouth of the room and stared at it, fascinated and repulsed. It was unconscious, immobilized, totally vulnerable. It would have been easy to climb onto the ice and drive the point of an icicle into the hollow's skull. And if anyone else had known it was here, I'm sure they would have done just that. But something stopped me. It was no threat to anyone now, this creature. Every hollow I'd come into contact with had left a mark on me. I saw their decaying faces in my dreams. Soon I'd be going home, where I'd no longer be Jacob the Hollow Slayer. I didn't want to take this one with me too. It wasn't my business anymore. I backed out of the room and closed the door. When I returned to the meeting hall, it was nearly dark outside, and the room was black as night. Because Miss Wren wouldn't allow the gas lamps to be lit for fear they'd be seen from the street, everyone had gathered around a few candles at the big oval table, some in chairs and others perched crisscross-legged on the table itself, talking in low voices and peering down at something. At the creak of the heavy doors, everyone turned to look at me. "Miss Wren?" Bronwyn said hopefully, straightening in her chair and squinting. "It's only Jacob," said another shadowy form. After a chorus of disappointed sighs, Bronwyn said, "Oh, hello, Jacob," and returned her attention to the table. As I walked toward them, I locked eyes with Emma. Holding her gaze, I saw something raw and unguarded there. A fear, I imagined, that I had in fact decided to do what she urged me to do. Then her eyes dulled, and she looked down again. I'd been half hoping Emma had taken pity on me and told the others I was leaving already. But of course she hadn't. I hadn't told her yet. She seemed to know, though, just from reading my face as I crossed the room. It was clear the others had no idea. They were so accustomed to my presence, they'd forgotten it was even under consideration. I steeled myself and asked for everyone's attention. "Wait a moment," said a heavily accented voice, and in the candlelight, I saw the snake girl and her python looking at me. "This boy here was just spewing a lot of rubbish about the place I hail from." She turned to the only chair at the table, which was empty, and said, "My people call it Simhaladvipa, dwelling place of lions." From the chair, Millard replied, "I'm sorry, but it says right here in plain calligraphy, the land of Serendip. The peculiar cartographers who made this were not in the business of making things up." Then I got a little closer and saw what it was they were arguing over. It was a map of days, though a much larger edition than the one we'd lost at sea. This one stretched practically across the table and was as thick as a brick stood on an end. I know my own home, and it's called Simhaladivipa, the snake girl insisted, and her python uncoiled from her neck and shot across the table to bang its nose against the map, indicating a teardrop-shaped island off India's coast. On this map, however, India was called Malabar, and the island, which I knew to be Sri Lanka, was overlaid with inky script that read Land of Serendip. It's pointless to argue, said Millard. Some places have as many names as they have occupants to name them. Now please ask your serpent to back away, lest he crinkle the pages. The snake girl harumphed and muttered something, and the python slunk away to coil around her neck again. All the while, I couldn't stop staring at the book. The one we'd lost was impressive enough, though I'd seen it opened only once, at night, by the skittish orange firelight of the burning home for peculiar children. This one was of another scale entirely. Not only was its orders of magnitude larger, but it was so ornate that it made the other look so much leather-bound like toilet paper. Colorful maps spilled across its pages, which were made from something stronger than paper, calfskin maybe, and edged with gold. Lush illustrations and legends and blocks of explanatory text stuffed with margins. Millard noticed me admiring it and said, "Isn't it stunning? Except perhaps the Codex Peculiaris, this edition of the map is the finest book in all peculiardom. It took a team of cartographers, artists, and bookmakers a lifetime to create, and it's said that Perplexus Anomalus himself drew some of the maps. I've wanted to see it in person ever since I was a boy. Oh, I am so pleased." "It's really something," I said. And it was. "Millard was just showing us some of his favorite parts," said Olive. "I like the pictures best." "To take their minds off things," Millard explained, "and make the waiting easier. Here, Jacob, come and help me turn the pages." Rather than ruin Millard's moment with my sad announcement, I decided it could wait a little while. I wasn't going anywhere until morning at least, and I wanted to enjoy a few more minutes with my friends, unburdened by weightier things. I sidled up next to Millard and slipped my fingers under the page, which was so large that it took both my hands and his to turn. We pored over the map. I was absorbed by it, especially the far-flung and lesser-known parts. Naturally, Europe and its many loops were well-defined, but farther afield things got sketchier. Vast swaths of Africa were simply blank. Terra incognita. The same was true of Siberia, although the map of days had its own name for Russia's Far East, the great far-reaching solitude. "Are there loops in these places?" asked Olive, pointing to a void that stretched across much of China. "Are there peculiars there, like us?" "Certainly there are," Millard said. "Peculiarness is determined by genes, not geography. But large portions of the peculiar world have simply not been explored." "Why not?" "I suppose we were too busy surviving." It occurred to me that the business of surviving precluded a great many things, exploring and falling in love not least among them. We turned more pages, hunting for blank spots. There were many, and all had fanciful names. The mournful kingdom of sand, the land made in anger, a high place full of stars. I mouthed the words silently to myself, appreciating their roundness. At the margins lurked fearsome places the map called wastes. The far north of Scandinavia was the icy waste. The middle of Borneo, the stifling waste. Much of the Arabian Peninsula, the pitiless waste. The southern tip of Patagonia, the cheerless waste. certain places weren't represented at all. New Zealand, Hawaii, Florida, which was just an ingrown nub at America's foot, barely there. Looking at the map of days, even the places that sounded most forbidding evoked in me a strange longing. It reminded me of the long-ago afternoons spent with my grandfather, studying historic maps in National Geographic, maps drawn long before the days of airplanes and satellites, when high-resolution cameras couldn't see into the world's every nook and cranny, when the shape of now familiar coastlines was guesswork, when the depths and dimensions of icy seas and forbidding jungles were cobbled together with rumors and legends from the wild-eyed ramblings of expeditioners who'd lost half their party exploring them. While Millard rambled on about the history of the map, I traced with my finger a vast and trackless desert in Asia, where the winged creature ends not its flight. Here was a whole world yet to be discovered, and I had only just cracked its surface. The thought filled me with regret, but also a shameful kind of relief. I would see my home again, after all, and my parents. And maybe it was childish, this old urge to explore for exploring's sake. There was romance in the unknown. But once a place had been discovered and cataloged and mapped, it was diminished, just another dusty fact in a book, sapped of mystery. So maybe it was better to leave a few spots on the map blank, to let the world keep a little of its magic, rather than forcing it to divulge every last secret. Maybe it was better, now and then, to wonder. And then I told them there was no point in waiting any longer. I just blurted it out. "I'm leaving," I said. "When this is all over, I'm going back home." There was a moment of shocked silence. Emma met my eyes finally, and I could see tears standing in them. Then Bronwyn got up from the table and threw her arms around me. "Brother," she said, "we'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," I said, "more than I can say." "But why?" said Olive, floating up to my eye level. "Was I too irritating?" I put my hand on her head and pushed her back down to the floor. No, it's got nothing to do with you," I said. "You were great, Olive." Emma stepped forward. "Jacob came here to help us," she said, "but he has to go back to his old life while it's still there waiting for him." The children seemed to understand. There was no anger. Most of them seemed genuinely happy for me. Miss Wren popped her head into the room to give us a quick update. Everything was going marvelously, she said. Miss Peregrine was well on her way to recovery. She'd be ready by morning. And then Miss Wren was gone again. "Thank the gods," said Horace. "Thank the birds," said Hugh. "Thank the gods and the birds," said Bronwyn. "All the birds and all the trees and all the forests." "Thank Jacob, too," said Millard. "We never would have made it this far without him." "We never even would have made it off the island," said Bronwyn. "You've done so much for us, Jacob." They all came and hugged me, each of them, one by one. Then they drifted away, and only Emma was left, and she hugged me last, a long, bittersweet embrace that felt too much like a goodbye. "Asking you to leave was the hardest thing I ever had to do," she said. "I'm glad you came around. I don't think I've had the strength to ask again." "I hate this," I said. "I wish there were a world where we could be together in peace." "I know," she said. I know. "I wish," I started to say. "Stop," she said. I said it anyway. "I wish you could come home with me." She looked away. "You know what would happen to me if I did." "I know." Emma disliked long goodbyes. I could feel her steeling herself, trying to pull her pain inside. "So," she said, businesslike, Logistics. When Miss Peregrine turns human, she'll lead you back through the carnival, into the underground, and when you pass through the changeover, you'll be back in the present. Think you can manage from there? I think so, I said. I'll call my parents, or go to a police station or something. I'm sure there's a poster of my face in every precinct in Britain by now, knowing my dad. I laughed a little, because if I hadn't, I might have started crying. Okay then, she said. Okay then, I said. We looked at each other, not quite ready to let go, not sure what else to do. My instinct was to kiss her, but I stopped myself. That wasn't allowed anymore. You go, she said. If you never hear from us again, well, one day you'll be able to tell our story. You can tell your kids about us, or your grandkids, and we won't be entirely forgotten. I knew then that from now on, every word that passed between us would hurt, would be wrapped up with and marked by the pain of this moment, and that I needed to pull away now or it would never stop. So I nodded sadly, hugging her one more time, and retreated to a corner to sleep, because I was very, very tired. After a while, the others dragged mattresses and blankets into the room and made a nest around me, and we packed together for warmth against the encroaching chill. But as the others began to bed down, I found myself unable to sleep, despite my exhaustion, and I got up and paced the room for a while, watching the children from a distance. I'd felt so many things since our journey began: joy, fear, hope, horror. But until now, I'd never once felt alone. Bronwyn had called me brother, but that didn't sound right anymore. I was a second cousin to them at best. Emma was right. I could never understand. They were so old, had seen so much, and I was from another world. Now it was time to go back. Eventually, I fell asleep to the sound of ice groaning and cracking in the floors beneath us and the attic above. The building was alive with it. That night, strange and urgent dreams. I'm home again, doing all the things I used to do. Tearing into a fast food hamburger, big, brown, and greasy. Riding shotgun in Ricky's Crown Vic, bad radio blaring. At the grocery store with my parents, sliding down long, too bright aisles, and Emma's there, cooling her hands in the ice at the fish counter, meltwater running everywhere. She doesn't recognize me. Then I'm at the arcade where I had my 12th birthday party, firing a plastic gun, bodies bursting, blood-filled balloons. Jacob, where are you? Then school. Teachers writing on the board, but the letters don't make sense. Then everybody's on their feet, hurrying outside. Something's wrong. A loud noise rising and falling. Everyone standing still, heads craned to the sky. Air raid. Jacob, where are you? Hand on my shoulder. It's an old man. A man without eyes, come to steal mine. Not a man, a thing, a monster. Running now, chasing my old dog. Years ago, she'd broken away from me, run off with her leash still attached, and got it wrapped around a branch while trying to tree a squirrel. Strangled herself. We spent 2 weeks wandering the neighborhood calling her name. Found her after 3. Old Snuffles. The siren deafening now. I run and a car pulls alongside and picks me up. My parents are inside, in formal wear. They won't look at me. The doors lock. We're driving and it's stifling hot outside. But the heater is on and the windows are up. And the radio is loud but tuned to the garble between stations. Mom, where are we going? She doesn't answer. Dad, why are we stopping here? Then we're out, walking, and I can breathe again. Pretty green place, smell of fresh cut grass, people in black, gathered around a hole in the ground. A coffin opens on a daye. I peer inside. It's empty, but for an oily stain slowly spreading across the bottom, blacking the white satin. Quick, close the lid. Black tar bubbles out from the cracks and grooves and drips down into the grass and sinks into the earth. Jacob, where are you? Say something. The headstone reads, Abraham Ezra Portman, and I'm tumbling into his open grave, darkness spinning up to swallow me, and I keep falling, and it's bottomless. And then I'm somewhere underground, alone, and wandering through 1,000 interconnecting tunnels, and I'm wandering, and it's cold. So cold I'm afraid my skin will freeze, and my bones will splinter, and everywhere there are yellow eyes watching me from the dark. I follow his voice. Jacob, come here. Don't be afraid. The tunnel angles upward, and there's a light at the end. Standing at its mouth, calmly reading a book, is a young man. And he looks just like me. Or almost like me. And maybe he is me. I think. But then he speaks, and it's my grandfather's voice. I have something to show you. For a moment, I jolted awake in the dark and knew I was dreaming. But I didn't know where I was. Only that I was not in bed anymore. Not in the meeting hall with the others. I'd gone elsewhere, and the room I was in was all black, with ice beneath me, my stomach writhing. Jacob, come here, where are you? A voice from outside, down the hall, a real voice, not something from a dream. And then I'm in the dream again, just outside the ropes of a boxing ring, and on the canvas, in the haze and lights, my grandfather faces off against a hologast. They circle each other. My grandfather is young and nimble on his feet, stripped to the waist, a knife in one hand. The hollow is bent and twisted, its tongues waving in the air, open jaws dripping black on the mat. It whips out a tongue and my grandfather dodges it. Don't fight the pain, that's the key, my grandfather says. It's telling you something. Welcome it. Let it speak to you. The pain says, hello, I am not other than you. I am of the hollow, but I am you also. The hollow whips at him again. My grandfather anticipates it, makes room in advance of the strike. Then the hollow strikes a third time, and my grandfather lashes out with his knife, and the tip of the hollow's black tongue falls to the mat, severed and jolting. They are stupid creatures, highly suggestible. Speak to them, Jacob. And my grandfather begins to speak, but not in English, nor Polish, nor any language I've heard outside my dreams. It's like some guttural outgassing, the sounds made with something other than a throat or a mouth. And the creature stops moving, merely swaying where it stands, seemingly hypnotized. Still speaking, his frightening gibberish, my grandfather lowers his knife and creeps towards it. The closer he gets, the more docile the creature becomes, finally sinking down to the mat on its knees. I think it's about to close its eyes and go to sleep, when suddenly the hollow breaks free of whatever spell my grandfather has cast over it, and it lashes out with all its tongues and impales my grandfather. As he falls, I leap over the ropes and run toward him, and the hollow slips away. My grandfather is on his back on the mat, and I'm kneeling by his side, my hand on his face, and he's whispering something to me, blood bubbling on his lips. So I bend closer to him. You are more than me, Jacob, he says. You are more than I ever was. I can feel his heart slow, hear it somehow, until whole seconds elapse between beats, then tens of seconds, and then, "Jacob, where are you?" I jolted awake again. Now there was light in the room. It was morning, just the blue beginning of it. I was kneeling on the ice in the half-filled room, and my hand wasn't on my grandfather's face, but resting atop the trapped hollow skull, its slow, reptilian brain. Its eyes were open and looking at me, and I was looking right back. "I see you." "Jacob, what are you doing? I've been looking for you everywhere." It was Emma, frantic, out in the hall. "What are you doing?" she said again. She couldn't see the hollow, didn't know it was there. I took my hand away from its head, slid back from it. "I don't know," I said. "I think I was sleepwalking." "It doesn't matter," she said. "Come quick, Miss Peregrine's about to change." Crowded into the little room were all the children and all the freaks from the sideshow, pale and nervous, pressed against the walls and crouched on the floor, in a wide berth around the two Imbrines, like gamblers in a backroom cockfight. Emma and I slipped in among them and huddled in a corner, eyes glued to the unfolding spectacle. The room was a mess. The rocking chair where Miss Wren had sat all night with Miss Peregrine was toppled on its side. The table of vials and beakers pushed roughly against the wall. Althea stood on top of it, clutching a net on a pole, ready to wield it. In the middle of the floor were Miss Wren and Miss Peregrine. Miss Wren was on her knees, and she had Miss Peregrine pinned to the floorboards, her hands in thick falconing gloves, sweating and chanting an old peculiar, while Miss Peregrine squawked and flailed with her talons. But no matter how hard Miss Peregrine thrashed, Miss Wren wouldn't let go. At some point in the night, Miss Wren's gentle massage had turned into something resembling an interspecies pro-wrestling match crossed with an exorcism. The bird half of Miss Peregrine had so thoroughly dominated her nature that it was refusing to be driven away without a fight. Both Imbrines had sustained minor injuries. Miss Peregrine's feathers were everywhere, and Miss Wren had a long, bloody scratch running down one side of her face. It was a disturbing sight, and many of the children looked on with open-mouthed shock. Wild-eyed and savage, the bird Miss Wren was grinding into the floor was one we hardly recognized. It seemed incredible that a fully restored Miss Peregrine of old might result from this violent display. But Althea kept smiling at us and giving us encouraging nods as if to say, "Almost there, just a little more floor grinding." For such a frail old lady, Miss Wren was giving Miss Peregrine a pretty good clobbering. But then the bird jabbed at Miss Wren with her beak, and Miss Wren's grasp slipped, and with a big flap of her wings, Miss Peregrine nearly escaped from her hands. The children reacted with shouts and gasps, but Miss Wren was quick, and she leapt up and managed to catch Miss Peregrine by her hind leg and thump her down against the floorboards again, which made the children gasp even louder. We weren't used to seeing our Imbrine treated like this, and Bronwyn actually had to stop Hugh from rushing into the fight to protect her. Both Imbrines seemed profoundly exhausted now, but Miss Peregrine more so. I could see her strength failing. Her human nature seemed to be winning out over her bird nature. "Come on, Miss Wren," Bronwyn cried. "You can do it, Miss Wren," called Horace. "Bring her back to us." "Please," said Althea, "we require absolute silence." After a long time, Miss Peregrine quit struggling and lay on the ground, with her wings splayed, gasping for air, feathered chest heaving. Miss Wren took her hands off the bird and sat back on her haunches. "It's about to happen," she said, "and when it does, I don't want any of you to rush over here grabbing at her. Your Imbrine will likely be very confused, and I want the first face she sees and voice she hears to be mine. I'll need to explain to her what's happened." And then she clasped her hands to her chest and murmured, "Come back to us, Alma. Come on, sister. Come back to us." Althea stepped down from the table and picked up a sheet, which she unfolded and held up in front of Miss Peregrine to shield her from view. When Imbrians turned from birds into humans, they were naked. This would give her some privacy. We waited in breathless suspense while a succession of strange noises came from behind the sheet. An expulsion of air, a sound like someone clapping their hands once, sharply, and then Miss Wren jumped up and took a shaky step backward. She looked frightened. Her mouth was open, and so was Althea's. And then Miss Wren said, "No, this can't be." And Althea stumbled, faint, letting the sheet drop. And there on the floor, we saw a human form, but not a woman's. He was naked, curled into a ball, his back to us. He began to stir and uncurl, and finally to stand. "Is that Miss Peregrine?" said Olive. "She came out funny." Clearly, it was not. The person before us bore no resemblance whatsoever to Miss Peregrine. He was a stunted little man with knobby knees and a balding head and a nose like a used pencil eraser, and he was stark naked and slimed head to toe with sticky, translucent gel. While Miss Wren gaped at him and grasped for something to steady herself against, in shock and anger, the others all began to shout, "Who are you? Who are you? What have you done with Miss Peregrine?" Slowly, the man raised his hands to his face and rubbed his eyes. Then, for the first time, he opened them. The pupils were blank and white. I heard someone scream. Then, very calmly, the man said, "My name is Colie, and you are all my prisoners now." "Prisoners?" said the folding man with a laugh. "What do you mean, we are prisoners?" Emma shouted at Miss Wren. "Where's Miss Peregrine? Who's this man, and what have you done with Miss Peregrine?" Miss Wren seemed to have lost the ability to speak. As our confusion turned to shock and anger, we barraged the little man with questions. He endured them with a slightly bored expression, standing at the center of the room with his hands folded demurely over his privates. "If you'd actually permit me to speak, I'll explain everything," he said. "Where is Miss Peregrine?" Emma shouted again, trembling with rage. "Don't worry," Colie said. "She's safely in our custody. We kidnapped her days ago on your island." "Then the bird we rescued from the submarine," I said. That was me," Colie said. "Impossible," said Miss Wren, finally finding her voice. "Whites can't turn into birds." "That is true, as a general rule. But Alma is my sister, you see, and though I wasn't fortunate enough to inherit any of her talents for manipulating time, I do share her most useless trait, the ability to turn into a vicious little bird of prey. I did a rather excellent job impersonating her, don't you think?" And he took a little bow. "Now, may I trouble you for some pants? You have me at a disadvantage." His request was ignored. Meanwhile, my head was spinning. I remembered Miss Peregrine once mentioning that she'd had 2 brothers. I'd seen their photo, actually, when they were all in the care of Miss Avocet together. Then I flashed back to the days we'd spent with the bird we believed that was Miss Peregrine. All we'd gone through, everything we'd seen. The caged Miss Peregrine that Golan had thrown into the ocean, that had been the real one, while the one we rescued had been her brother. The cruel things Miss Peregrine had done recently made more sense now. That hadn't been Miss Peregrine at all. But I was still left with a million questions. "All that time," I said. "Why did you stay a bird? Just to watch us?" While my lengthy observations of your childish bickering were incontrovertibly fascinating, I was quite hoping you could help me with a piece of unfinished business. When you killed my men in the countryside, I was impressed. You proved yourselves to be quite resourceful. Naturally, my men could have swept in and taken you at any point after that, but I thought it better to let you twist in the wind a while and see if your ingenuity might not lead us to the one Imbrine who's consistently managed to evade us. With that, he turned to Miss Wren and grinned broadly. Hello, Balenciaga. So good to see you again. Miss Wren moaned and fanned herself with her hand. You idiots! You cretins! You morons! The clown shouted. You led them right to us! And as a nice bonus, said Coll, we paid a visit to your menagerie as well. My men came by not long after we left. The stuffed heads of that emu raff and boxer dog will look magnificent above my mantelpiece. You monster! Miss Wren screeched, and she fell back against the table, legs failing her. Oh, my bird! Exclaimed Bronwyn, her eyes wide. Fiona and Claire! You'll see them again soon, Coll said. I've got them in safekeeping. It all began to make a terrible kind of sense. Coll knew he'd be welcomed into Miss Wren's menagerie disguised as Miss Peregrine, and when she wasn't at home to be kidnapped, he'd nudged us after her toward London. In so many ways, we'd been manipulated from the very beginning, from the moment we chose to leave the island, and I chose to go along. Even the tale he'd chosen for Bronwyn to read that first night in the forest about the stone giant had been a manipulation. He wanted us to find Miss Wren's loop and think that it was we who'd cracked its secret. Those of us who weren't reeling in horror frothed with anger. Several people were shouting that Coll should be killed, and were busily hunting for sharp objects to do the job with, while the few who'd kept their heads were trying to hold them back. All the while, Coll stood calmly, waiting for the fur to die down. If I may, he said, I wouldn't entertain any ideas about killing me. You could, of course. No one can stop you. But it will go much easier for you if I am unharmed when my men arrive. He pretended to check a non-existent watch on his wrist. Ah, yes, he said. They should be here now. Yes, just about now, surrounding the building, covering every conceivable point of exit, including the roof. And might I add, there are 56 of them, and they are armed positively to the teeth, beyond the teeth. Have you ever seen what a minigun can do to a child-sized human body? He looked directly at Olive and said, It would turn you to cat's meat, darling. You're bluffing, said Enoch. There's no one out there. I assure you there is. They've been watching me closely since we left your depressing little island, and I gave my signal to them the moment Balenciaga revealed herself to us. That was over 12 hours ago. More than ample time to muster a fighting force. Allow me to verify this, said Miss Wren, and she left to go to the Imbrine meeting room, where the windows were obstructed from ice mostly from the outside, and a few had small telescope tunnels melted through them with minor attachments that let us look down at the street below. While we waited for her to return, the clown and the snake girl debated the best ways to torture Coll. I say we pull out his toenails first, said the clown, then stick hot pokers in his eyes. Where I come from, the snake girl said, the punishment for treason is being covered in honey, bound to an open boat, and floated out into a stagnant pond. The flies eat you alive. Coll stood cricking his neck from side to side and stretching his arms boredly. Apologies, he said. Remaining a bird for so long tends to cramp the muscles. You think we're kidding, said the clown. I think you're amateurs, said Coll. If you found a few young bamboo shoots, I could show you something really wicked. As delightful as that would be, though, I do recommend you melt this ice, because it'll save us all a world of trouble. I say this for your sake. out of genuine concern for your well-being." "Yeah, right," said Emma. "Where was your concern when you were stealing those peculiar souls?" "Ah, yes, our 3 pioneers. Their sacrifice was necessary. All for the sake of progress, my dears. What we're trying to do is advance the peculiar species, you see." "What a joke," she said. "You're nothing but power-hungry sadists." "I know you're all quite sheltered and uneducated," said Call. "But did your inbrains not teach you about our people's history? We peculiars used to be like gods roaming the earth, giants, kings, the world's rightful rulers. But over the centuries and millennia, we've suffered a terrible decline. We mixed with normals to such an extent that the purity of our peculiar blood has been diluted almost to nothing. And now look at us, how degraded we've become. We hide in these temporal backwaters, afraid of the very people we should be ruling, arrested in a state of perpetual childhood by this confederacy of busybodies, these women. Don't you see how they've reduced us? Are you not ashamed? Do you have any idea of the power that's rightfully ours? Don't you feel the blood of giants in your veins?" He was losing his cool now, going red in the face. "We aren't trying to eradicate peculiardom, we're trying to save it." "Is that right?" said the clown, and then walked over to Call and spat right in his face. "Well, you've got a twisted way of going at it." Call wiped the spit away with the back of his hand. "I knew it would be pointless to reason with you. The inbrains have been feeding you lies and propaganda for 100 years. Better, I think, to take your souls and start fresh again." Miss Wren returned. "He speaks the truth," she said. "There must be 50 soldiers out there, all of them armed." "Oh," moaned Bronwyn, "what are we going to do?" "Give up," said Call. "Go quietly." "It doesn't matter how many of them there are," Althea said. "They'll never be able to get through all my ice." "The ice! I'd nearly forgotten. We were inside a fortress of ice." "That's right," Call said brightly. "She's absolutely right. They can't get in. So there's a quick and painless way to do this, where you melt the ice voluntarily right now, or there's the long, stubborn, slow, boring, sad way, which is called a siege, where for weeks and months my men stand guard outside while we stay in here quietly starving to death. Maybe you'll give up when you're desperate and hungry enough, or maybe you'll start cannibalizing one another. Either way, if my men have to wait that long, they'll torture every last one of you to death when they get in, which, inevitably, they will. And if we must go the slow, boring, sad route, then please, for the sake of the children, bring me some trousers." "Althea, fetch the man some damn trousers," said Miss Wren. "But do not, under any circumstances, melt this ice." "Yes, ma'am," replied Althea, and she went out. "Now," said Miss Wren, turning to Call, "here's what we'll do. You tell your men to allow a safe passage out of here, or we'll kill you. If we have to do it, I assure you we will, and we'll dump your stinking corpse out a hole in the ice a piece at a time. While I'm sure your men won't like that much, we'll have a very long time to devise our next move." Call shrugged and said, "Oh, all right." "Really?" Miss Wren said. "I thought I could scare you," he said, "but you're right. I'd rather not be killed. So take me to one of these holes in the ice, and I'll do as you've asked and shout down to my men." Althea came back in with some pants and threw them at Call, and he put them on. Miss Wren appointed Bronwyn, the clown, and the folding man to be Call's guards, arming them with broken icicles. With their points aimed at his back, we proceeded into the hall. But as we were bottlenecking through the small, dark office that led to the inbrain meeting room, everything went wrong. Someone tripped over a mattress and went down, and then I heard a scuffle break out in the dark. Emma lit a flame just in time to see Call dragging Althea away from us by the hair. She kicked and flailed while Coll held a sharpened icicle to her throat and shouted, "Stay back, or I drive this through her jugular." We followed Coll at a careful distance. He dragged Althea thrashing and kicking into the meeting hall, and then up onto the oval table, where he put her in a chokehold, the icicle held an inch from her eye, and shouted, "These are my demands." Before he could get any further, though, Althea slapped the icicle from his hand. It flew and landed point down in the pages of the Map of Days. While his mouth was still forming an O of surprise, Althea's hand latched onto the front of Coll's pants, and the O broadened into a grimace of shock. "Now," Emma bellowed, and then she and I and Bronwyn rushed toward them through the wooden doors. But as we ran, the distance across that big room seemed to yawn, and in seconds, the fight between Althea and Coll had taken another turn. Coll let go of Althea and fell to the table, his arms stretched and grasping for the icicle. Althea fell with him, but he did not let go. And now, Althea had both hands wrapped around his thigh, and a coating of ice was spreading quickly across Coll's lower half, paralyzing him from the waist down, and freezing Althea's hands to his leg. He got one finger around the icicle, and then his whole hand, and groaning with effort and pain, he wrenched it free from the map and twisted his upper body until he had the point of it poised above Althea's back. He screamed at her to stop and let him go and melt the ice, or he'd plunge it into her. We were just yards from them now, but Bronwyn caught Emma and me and held us back. Coll screamed, "Stop! Stop this!" as his face contorted in pain, the ice racing up his chest and over his shoulders. In a few seconds, his arms and hands would be encased too. Althea didn't stop. And then Coll did it. He stabbed the icicle into her back. She tensed in shock and then groaned. Miss Wren ran toward them, screaming Althea's name, while the ice that had spread across most of Coll's body began, very quickly, to recede. By the time Miss Wren reached them, he was nearly free of it. But then the ice everywhere was melting, fading and retracting just as quickly as Althea's life was. The ice in the attic, dripping and raining down through the ceiling, just as Althea's own blood ran down her body. She was in Miss Wren's arms now, slack, going. Bronwyn was on the table, Coll's throat in one hand, his weapon crushed to snow in her other. We could hear the ice and floors below us melting, too, and then it was gone from the windows. We rushed to look out, and could see water flooding from lower windows into the street, where soldiers in gray urban camo were clinging to lampposts and fire hydrants to keep from being washed away by the icy waves. Then we heard their boots stomping on the stores below, and coming down from the roof above, and moments later, they burst in with their guns, shouting. Some of the men wore night vision headsets, and all of them bristled with weapons, compact machine guns, laser-sighted pistols, combat knives. It took 3 of them to pry Bronwyn away from Coll, who wheezed through his half-crushed windpipe. "Take them away and don't be gentle." Miss Wren was shouting, begging us to comply. "Do as they say or they'll hurt you." But she wouldn't let go of Althea's body, so they made an example of her. They tore Althea away and kicked Miss Wren to the ground, and one of the soldiers fired his machine pistol into the ceiling just to scare us. When I saw Emma about to make a fireball with her hands, I grabbed her by the arm and begged her not to. "Don't, please don't. They'll kill you." And then a rifle butt slammed into my chest, and I fell gasping to the floor. One of the soldiers noosed my hands together behind me. I heard them counting us, Coll listing our names, making sure even Millard was accounted for. Because of course by now, having spent the last 3 days with us, he knew all of us, knew everything about us. I was pulled to my feet, and we were all pushed out through the doors, into the hallway. Stumbling along next to me was Emma, blood in her hair, and I whispered, Please, just do what they say. And though she didn't acknowledge it, I knew she heard me. The look on her face was all rage and fear and shock, and I think pity too, for all I just had snatched away from me. In the stairwell, the floors and stairs below were a whitewater river, a vortex of cascading waves. Up was the only way out. We were shoved up the stairs, through a door, and into a strong daylight onto the roof. Everyone wet, frozen, frightened into silence. All but Emma. "Where are you taking us?" she demanded. Call came right to her and grinned in her face while a soldier held her cuffed hands behind her. "A very special place," Call said, "where not a drop of your peculiar souls will go to waste." She flinched, and he laughed and turned away, stretching his arms above his head and yawning. From his shoulder blades jutted a weird pair of knobby protrusions, like the stems of aborted wings, the only outward clue that this twisted man bore any relation to an Imbrine. Voices shouted from the top of another building. More soldiers. They were laying down a collapsible bridge between rooftops. "What about the dead girl?" one of the soldiers asked. "Such a pity, such a waste," Call said, clucking his tongue. "I should have liked to dine on her soul. It's got no taste on its own, the peculiar soul," he said, addressing us. "Its natural consistency is a bit gelatinous and pasty, really, but whipped together with I don't know how to say that word, soup con of remoulade, and spread upon white meat, it's actually quite palatable." Then he laughed very loudly for a long time. As they led us away, one by one, over the wide, collapsible bridge, I felt a familiar twinge in my gut. Faint, but strengthening. Slow, but quickening. The hologhast, unfrozen now, coming slowly back to life. 10 soldiers marched us out of the loop at gunpoint, past the carnival tents and sideshows and gaping carnival goers, down the rats-worn of alleys, with their stalls and vendors and ragamuffin kids staring after us, into the disguising room, past the pile of cast-off clothes we'd left behind, and down into the underground. The soldiers prodded us along, barking at us to keep quiet, though no one had said a word in minutes, to keep our heads down and stay in line or be pistol-whipped. Call was no longer with us. He had stayed behind with the larger contingent of soldiers to mop up, which I think meant scouring the loop for hiders and stragglers. The last time we saw him, he was pulling on a pair of modern boots and an army jacket and told us he was absolutely sick of our faces but would see us on the other side, whatever that meant. We passed through the changeover and forward in time again, but not to a version of the tunnels I recognized. The tracks and ties were all metal now, and the lights in the tunnels were different. Not red incandescents, but flickering fluorescent tubes that glowed a sickly green. Then we came out of the tunnel and onto the platform, and I understood why. We were no longer in the 19th century, nor even the 20th. The crowd of sheltering refugees was gone now. The station nearly deserted. The circular staircase we'd come down was gone too. Replaced by an escalator, a scrolling LED screen hung above the platform. Time to next train, 2 minutes. On the wall was a poster for a movie I'd seen earlier in the summer, just before my grandfather died. We'd left 1940 behind. I was back in the present. A few of the kids took note of this with looks of surprise and fear, as if afraid they would age forward in a matter of minutes. But for most of them, I think the shock of our sudden captivity was not about to be trumped by an unexpected trip to the present. They were worried about having their souls extracted, not about developing gray hair and liver spots. The soldiers corralled us in the middle of the platform to wait for the train. Hard shoes clicked toward us. I risked a look over my shoulder and saw a policewoman coming. Behind him, stepping off the escalator, were 3 more. "Hey," Enoch shouted. "Policeman, over here!" A soldier punched Enoch in the gut, and he doubled over. "Everything good here?" said the closest policeman. "They've taken us prisoner," said Bronwyn. "They aren't really soldiers, they're—" And then she got a punch in the gut too, though it didn't seem to hurt her. What stopped her from saying more was the policeman himself, who took off his mirrored sunglasses to reveal stark white eyes. Bronwyn shrank back. "A bit of advice," the policeman said. "No help is coming to you. We are everywhere. Accept that, and this will all be easier." Normals were starting to fill the station. The soldiers pressed in on us from all sides, keeping their weapons hidden. A train hissed into the station, filled with people. Its electric doors whooshed open, and a glut of passengers spilled out. The soldiers began pushing us toward the nearest car, the policemen going ahead to scatter what few passengers remained inside. "Find another car," they barked. "Get out," the passengers grumbled, but complied. But there were more people behind us on the platform, trying to push into the car, and a few of the soldiers who'd been ringing us had to break away to stop them. And then there was just enough confusion, the doors trying to close, but the police holding them open, until a warning alarm began to sound. The soldiers shoving us forward so hard that Enoch tripped, sending other children tripping over him in a chain reaction, that the folding man, whose wrists were so skinny he'd been able to slip his cuffs, decided to make a break for it and ran. A shot rang out, then a second, and the folding man tumbled and splayed onto the ground. The crowd swarmed away in a panic, people screaming and scrambling to escape the gunshots, and what had been merely confusion deteriorated into total chaos. Then they were shoving us and kicking us onto the train. Beside me, Emma was resisting, making the soldier who was pushing her get close. Then I saw her cuffed hands flare orange, and she reached behind her and grabbed him. The soldier crumpled to the ground, shrieking. A hand-shaped hole melted through his camo. Then the soldier who was pushing me raised the butt of his gun and was about to bring it down on Emma's neck, when some instinct triggered in me, and I drove my shoulder into his back. He stumbled. Emma melted through her metal cuffs, which fell away from her hands in a deformed mass of red-hot metal. My soldier turned his gun on me now, howling with rage, but before he could fire, Emma came at him from behind and clapped her hands around his face, her fingers so hot they melted through his cheeks like warm butter. He dropped the gun and collapsed, screaming. All this happened very quickly in a matter of seconds. Then 2 more soldiers were coming at us. Nearly everyone else was on the train now, all but Bronwyn and the blind brothers, who had never been cuffed and were merely standing by with arms linked. Seeing that they were about to be shot to death, Bronwyn did something I could never have imagined her doing under any other circumstances. She slapped the older brother hard across the face, then took the younger one and wrenched him roughly away from the older. The moment their connection was severed, they let out a scream so powerful it generated its own wind. It tore through the station like a tornado of pure energy, blowing Emma and me backwards, shattering the soldiers' glasses, eclipsing most of the frequencies my ears could detect, so that all I heard was a squeaking high-pitched ee. I saw all the windows of the train break, and the LED screens shiver to knife shards, and the glass light tubes along the roof explode, so that we were plunged for a moment into pure darkness. Then the hysterical red flashing of emergency lights. I had fallen onto my back, the wind knocked out of me, my ears ringing. Something was pulling me backwards by the collar, away from the train, and I couldn't quite remember how to work my arms and legs well enough to resist. Beneath the ringing in my ears, I could make out frantic voices shouting, "Go! Just go!" I felt something cold and wet against the back of my neck, and was dragged into a phone booth. Emma was there too, folded into a ball in the corner, semi-conscious. "Pull your legs up," I heard a familiar voice say, and from around back of me came trotting a short, furry thing with the pushed-in snout and a jowly mouth. The dog. Addison. I pulled my legs into the booth, my wits returning enough to move but not speak. Last thing I saw, in the hellish red flashing, was Miss Wren being shoved into the train car, and the doors snapping closed, and all my friends inside with her, cowering at gunpoint, framed by the shattered windows of the train, surrounded by men with white eyes. Then the train roared away into the darkness and was gone. I startled awake to a tongue licking my face. The dog. The door of the phone booth had been pulled closed, and the three of us were crammed inside on the floor. "You passed out," said the dog. "They're gone," I said. "Yes, but we can't stay here. They'll come back for you. We have to go." "I don't think I can stand up just yet." The dog had a cut on his nose, and a hunk of one ear was missing. Whatever he'd gone to get here, he'd been through hell too. I felt a tickle against my leg, but was too tired to look and see what it was. My head was heavy as a boulder. "Don't go to sleep again," said the dog, and then he turned to Emma and began to lick her face. The tickle again. This time I shifted my weight and reached for it. It was my phone. My phone was vibrating. I couldn't believe it. I dug it out of my pocket. The battery was nearly dead, the signal almost non-existent. The screen read, "Dad, 177 missed calls." If I hadn't been so groggy, I probably wouldn't have answered. At any moment, a man with a gun might arrive to finish us off. Not a good time for a conversation with my father. But I wasn't thinking straight, and anytime my phone rang, my old Pavlovian impulse was to pick it up. I pressed answer. "Hello?" A choked cry on the other end, then, "Jacob? Is that you?" "It's me." I must have sounded awful, my voice a faint rasp. Oh my God, my father said. He hadn't expected me to answer. Maybe had given me up for dead already and was calling now out of some reflective grief instinct that he couldn't switch off. What happened? Where are you, son?" "I'm okay," I said. "I'm alive, in London." I don't know why I told him that last part. I guess I felt like I owed him some truth. Then it sounded like he aimed his head away from the receiver to shout to someone else. "It's Jacob. He's in London." Then back to me. "We thought you were dead." "I know. I'm not surprised. I'm sorry about leaving the way I did. I hope I didn't scare you too much." "You scared us to death, Jacob." My father sighed, a long shivering sound that was relief and disbelief and exasperation all at once. "Your mother and I are in London too. After the police couldn't find you on the island. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You just tell us where you are and we'll come get you." Emma began to stir. Her eyes opened and she looked at me, bleary, like she was somewhere deep inside herself and peering out at me through miles of brain and body. Addison said, "Good, very good, now stay with us," and began licking her hand instead. I said into the phone, "I can't come, Dad. I can't drag you into this." "Oh God, I knew it. You're on drugs, aren't you? Look, whoever you've gotten mixed up with, we can help. We don't have to bring the police into it. We just want you back." Then everything went dark for a second in my head, and when I came to again, I felt such a gut punch of pain in my belly that I dropped the phone. Addison jerked his head up to look at me. "What is it?" That's when I saw a long black tongue pressing against the outside of the booth's glass. It was quickly joined by a second, then a third. The hollow, the unfrozen hologhast. It had followed us. The dog couldn't see it, but he could read the look on my face easily enough. "It's one of them, isn't it?" I mouthed, "Yes," and Addison shrank into a corner. "Jacob," my dad's tinny voice from the other phone. "Jacob, are you there?" The tongues began to wrap around the booth, encircling us. I didn't know what to do. only that I had to do something. So I shifted my feet under me, planted my hands on the walls, and struggled to my feet. Then I was face to face with it. Tongues fanned from its gaping, bladed mouth. Its eyes were black and weeping more black, and they stared into mine, inches away through the glass. The hollow let out a low, guttural snarl that turned my insides to jelly, and I half wished the beast would just kill me and be done with it, so all this pain and terror could end. The dog barked in Emma's face. "Wake up, girl, we need you. Make your fire." But Emma could neither speak nor stand, and we were alone in the underground station, but for two women in raincoats who were backing away, holding their noses against the hollow's fetid stench. And then the booth, the whole booth with all of us in it, swayed one way and then the other, and I heard whatever bolts anchored it to the floor groan and snap. Slowly, the hollow lifted us off the ground, 6 inches, then a foot, then 2, only to slam us back down again, shattering the booth windows, raining glass on us. Then there was nothing at all between the hollow and me. Not an inch, not a pane of glass. Its tongues wriggled into the booth, snaking around my arm, my waist, then around my neck, squeezing tighter and tighter until I couldn't breathe. That's when I knew I was dead. And because I was dead, and there was nothing I could do, I stopped fighting. I relaxed every muscle, closed my eyes, and gave in to the hurt bursting inside my belly like fireworks. Then a strange thing happened. The hurt stopped hurting. The pain shifted and became something else. I entered into it, and it enveloped me, and beneath its roiling surface I discovered something quiet and gentle, a whisper. I opened my eyes again. The hollow seemed frozen now, staring at me. I stared back, unafraid. My vision was spotting black from lack of oxygen, but I felt no pain. The hollow's grip on my neck relaxed. I took my first breath in minutes, calm and deep. And then the whisper I'd found inside me traveled up from my belly and out of my throat and past my lips, making a noise that didn't sound like my language, but whose meaning I knew innately. Back off. The hollow retracted its tongues, drew them all back into its bulging mouth and shut its jaws, bowed its head slightly, a gesture almost of submission. And then it sat down. Emma and Addison looked up at me from the floor, surprised by the sudden calm. "What just happened?" said the dog. "There's nothing to be afraid of," I said. "Is it gone?" "No, but it won't hurt us now." He didn't ask how I knew this, just nodded, assured by the tone of my voice. I opened the booth door and helped Emma to her feet. "Can you walk?" I asked her. She put an arm around my waist, leaned her weight against mine, and together we took a step. "I'm not leaving you," I said, "whether you like it or not." Into my ears she whispered, "I love you, Jacob." "I love you too," I whispered back. I stooped to pick up the phone. "Dad? What was that noise? Who are you with?" "I'm here. I'm okay." "No, you're not. Just stay where you are." "Dad, I have to go. I'm sorry." "Wait, don't hang up," he said. "You're confused, Jake." "No, I'm like Grandpa. I have what Grandpa had." A pause on the other end. Then, "Please, come home." I took a breath. There was too much to say and no time to say it. This would have to do. I hope I'll be able to come home someday, but there are things I need to do first. I just want you to know I love you and Mom, and I'm not doing any of this to hurt you. We love you too, Jake, and if it's drugs or whatever it is, we don't care. We'll get you right again. Like I said, you're confused." "No, Dad. I'm peculiar. Then I hung up the phone, and speaking a language I didn't know I knew, I ordered the hollow to stand. Obedient as a shadow, it did. End of chapter 13. The end.